All right, let's see game 3 of DFW FIDE Royal Tournament that took place at Texas Chess Center, Irving location, where I played against a very tough 1800, 1850, I think is his rating, Arturo Ida. Let's see. So he starts with e4. I've actually played against Arturo before, and I also had a difficult time in our previous game too. So back then I played e5, and I think we played some kind of Italian. Now I decided to go g6 and mix it up basically a little bit. He goes d4, bishop g7, knight f3, d6. I was intending to go with modern or maybe Pirk, but he surprised me with a move order here. So bishop e3. Now that made me think here, how do I want to handle this? I guess c5 could have been played here, but that probably will transpose into a dragon position actually after something like this. A very interesting transposition actually. So I decided to go c6 here, and then he doesn't go knight c3, which is probably the most natural continuation, right? He goes bishop c4. Now knight f6, and then knight b2 d2. Again, a little bit of a weird move order here. I don't think bishop c4 is the best way to play here for white for sure. It invites this d5 move, and especially so after like knight bd2 here. Short castle, short castle. Computer says that probably d5 is the right move here, and I figured as much during the game. However, I thought that after captures, let's say something like bishop d3 here, the game now is very similar to London opening, where I thought that that extra tempo that I won with the d5, where bishop will have to retreat back, right? They played bishop c4 and then bishop back to d3. I was not sure how useful that extra tempo was. I was thinking something along the lines of knight c6 and c3 here, but computer finds a very powerful continuation: knight g4, bishop f4. Well, knight g4 to try to get rid of that dark square bishop, right? The London bishop basically. Bishop f4, knight c6 now, and the fun, or I would say a powerful, actually, not only fun, the powerful push here is if h3 and this knight is kicked away, black can go e5 immediately, and if you take on g4, then takes on f4. That is some power play, I think, there. Now if you take on e5, then probably takes back, and I think black solves all the opening problems here, and I would think that this is probably slightly better for black, just a tiny bit here, considering that white will have to probably give up one of the bishops here. All right, so what I played instead was knight b to d7. I actually spent probably about 20 minutes in this position, considering all the different options, like knight g4 is an option, d5 is an option, b5 is an option, but I decided to play just a normal Pirk type of style here, knight b to d7, with the idea of e5 basically. If you go e5, then I will jump the knight to d5. So c3, e5, rook goes to e1. I play h6 here, threatening knight g4 move. White plays h3, and I decide to go b5. Computer dislikes this actually a lot. Says that probably I'll have to play like queen e7 here and try to stay in the center / on the king side here. b5, it actually suggests that after bishop f1, something like this, d takes e5, d takes e5, a4, and let's say a6, queen c2, white is much better. And I didn't feel so during the game. I thought this would be maybe just like a little better for black, for white, excuse me, a little better for white, considering that their pieces are more actively placed. But now thinking about it, it's actually more than a little advantage for white, because white has no bad piece. All their pieces are basically aimed at my queenside here, black's queenside, um, and I don't see the reason why white should not be better here because all his pieces are well placed, and then he will probably start pushing here c4, b4, knight b3, and I'm not sure what black's plan should be. Black's plan should be probably reacting on the white's ideas. I thought like queen e7, knight c5, but if white gets the c4 going here, I think black can forget about like knight c5 there, and should be more reactive rather than proactive. Well, luckily for me, he decides to move the bishop on b3, and I think one of the big misunderstanding from his side here was not trading the d4 pawn. I think white wants to open up the center here, which did not happen pretty much entire game. Queen e2, I play a6, and then rook a to d1. I go queen e7 again now to get the queen away from this X-ray on the D file, and this was actually exactly type of position I was hoping to get against a lower rated player, where basically all the pieces are still kept on the board, and a lot of pawns are still kept on the board here, and there will be a lot of maneuvering and a lot of room for mistakes from both sides. All right. So logically, a better player should prevail in these situations. So that's kind of what happened here. I think knight h2 was played with the idea of, I think, knight g4. So after thinking a little bit about this, I decided to go knight h5. Now, point is that if you go knight g4, basically I'll play knight f4 to block this diagonal and then push h5, okay, to kick that. That's also what happened in the game. I was thinking also this move, moving the king away, but I was not sure of an idea, something like knight f3 and then maybe queen d2, and it's not so clear how I defend the h6 pawn. So my opponent first played bishop c2. I was a little perplexed about this move. I'm not sure actually why move the bishop back immediately. I haven't even played c5 yet. So now if you move the bishop, then I'm not gonna play c5, right? So I go rook f to e8, knight g4, and now I put knight on f4. This was my idea all along. As I said, I was not really planning going king h7 there. I had already taken measures here to go basically knight f4. My another idea, if white does not go knight g4 here, is to play knight f8 and then knight e6. That's also the reason why I played rook f to e8, to basically free the f8 square for my knight. And then from e6, this knight can come to f4, and also I'm putting the pressure on the d4 pawn. So he played knight g4 immediately. Now again, I do not manage to bring my knight to e6 because he's gonna have this queen d2 move, which will put the pressure on h6 pawn. So I decide to go knight f4, bishop captures f4, e takes f4, queen f3. Now I kick this knight away with h5, knight retreats back to h2, and then queen goes to g5 to protect the f4 pawn. He moves the queen away to bring the knight to f3 here, and I bring the rook to d8 with the idea of preparing c5. All right, computer actually suggests that immediate c5 would probably be a better move here. If you take knight takes c5 and there is no queen well, I guess there is, but I'll have rook d8 and queen e7. Now this queen might get into a tricky situation here. If you move the d2 knight, then you're gonna lose the e4 pawn. Yeah, something along the lines of that. If you take with the other rook, probably we'll just take on e4 with the knight. Okay, so I didn't play immediate c5. I played rook d8 to prepare c5 first. He goes knight f3. Now I retreat the queen back to f6 basically, and this is where he starts to go wrong. I think we're both already about 25 minutes probably. I had a little more time, maybe 30 minutes. He had about like close to 20 minutes, like 23, something like that. So I think he was already getting nervous of the potential time travel approaching, basically. So he goes knight b3, which I think knight has nothing to do on b3 here. It is hard to find a useful square for that knight, but b3 ain't one, that's for sure. So c5, I go c5 anyway. Now if knight a5, then I simply go bishop a8, and what does that knight do on a4, a5, right? So c5, knight retreats back to c8 here. C1, I guess because the c4 was the threat, so he was not sure where to put that knight, so puts it on c1. But now I basically get the counterplay going without white having a clear direction here. I think knight b6 would probably be the best move here, trying to like go knight c4 on the next move. But I played knight f8 move, which after the move I immediately figured that this would be weakening my queenside a little bit, and that's exactly what happened here. White goes a4 to attack my b5 pawn. Now knight f8 also wants to, I think that my big idea on knight f8 was to get g5 going, and if I play g5 immediately here, there might be e5 and then queen h7 check, okay? And it's not clear for sure. I think black should be still better here after something like this, but I was not sure how big this advantage can be for black here with the opposite colored bishops. So I decide to cover the h7 square basically with knight f8. He goes a4 to weaken my queenside here. Then I decide to protect that pawn with bishop c6, and I think this was the critical moment in the game, and it kind of showed that my opponent here did not quite understand the intricacies of this position here, and closes the center with d5. This is, I think, a clear strategical misunderstanding, after which now game becomes very one-sided. Basically, I'll retreat bishop back to d7, and now due to the black's kingside expansion here, and also a potential e5 outpost, white's position will become miserable. Not only miserable, but they will have to wait for black to decide basically how they're gonna push, and how they're gonna get the counterplay going here. I think what happened afterwards was AB, knight e2. Again, this knight is struggling to find a useful place, and black has all the fun after g5, knight h2, g4, king goes to h1, knight g6 here. The knight is now coming potentially to e5 or f3 is also the point. Knight g1, a very set situation here for both knights. Knight e5 and like if you move the queen, bishop h6, something like this, I think would definitely be more patient. Move the king away and then rook g8, double up on g5, and there is no way white can handle this, because simply rooks will not be able to help the white king side here. So black will simply crash through after all pieces has been put on the king side here. I think during the game, I figured that f3 was also a serious alternative here, because if you take there, then knight f4, and you'll have to retreat back, and then takes. This should also be very comfortable. Bishop h6, king there, rook g8, with crushing attack as well. So he decides to keep the center closed, hoping for some miracle that black will not be able to open up the king side here. But after g3, black simply has knight e5, and when you retreat the queen, then h4. Now forcing the breakthrough basically here, and white is just doomed. G takes h4. Here I figured that queen h4 puts white in Zugzwang almost, okay? Basically, black is all tied up after queen h4. There's something like bishop h6 and then probably bishop f4. It's really hard to come up with the moves with white, and black simply plays bishop f4, then takes on h2, and after takes, let's say take on h3, knight g4, knight f2 is now a threat, which just finishes the game. Um, I actually didn't see this that after g takes h3, knight g4, knight f2 was just game over. So I decided to go with another line which also wins and wins the piece immediately. So g3 attacking the knight and also g2. White has to take, and then f2 now forking rook and the knight, right? So rook moves up, then bishop h6. Now rook has to go back again. Now take that knight, promote to a queen, and after queen g1, simply bishop takes h3. And black is a piece up. There will be no g4 because the h4 pawn is hanging. Rook f2, queen g6. Now bishop e3 is hanging, so there is no g4. Knight f1 to stop bishop e3, but then there is bishop g4, and once the rook moves away, bishop f3 check. And if you go move the king up, knight g4, so white will have to give up the rook basically. Knight takes f3. The rest was, I think, the inertia, playing by inertia from my opponent here. Knight retreats back to e5, knight h2. Now I figured the easiest way to win would be just putting the knight on d3, which will win the e4 pawn next. So something like rook f1, knight d3, captures, and then the last fight here, knight g4 to give me a few checks. And I simply decided to capture here. After queen f7, move the king on the side, and when you go rook f6, I have queen h3 and I checkmate first. Well, it's technically not a checkmate, but you'll have to move the rook back, then queen g3, and I simply take on f2. And after one check here, I will just move king to g8, and black wins. I think actually an interesting game, and the good illustration here that if opponent aims at pushing on the side, let's say king side or queen side, you do not want to close up your center. You want to keep your center intact here. So I think d5 was the critical mistake. Up to d5, I think game is still double-edged here. Clearly, I would prefer black here because black's play is more straightforward, but I think white is still very much into the game here if they do not close the center with d5, because then when black tries to push g5 and g4, white will want to somehow open up the center basically to reduce the black's attack. Cool. I hope this was instructive. I will see you in the next game.